Greetings all, this is Hairy Nick. How is everyone going? Welcome back to the Hangar Bay, the weekly X-Wing show where we talk about your squads. Now, things have changed in the world of X-Wing. We now have 5 factions. Depending on where you are in the world, you may have access to all of this stuff. As of the recording of this video, we don't have this wave released in Australia just yet. However, if you are in the UK or Germany, you have access to the Resistance and First Order. FFG, about a week ago, put all the costings up on their website. Unfortunately, as of the recording of this video, there is not any First Order or Resistance content put into the official squad builder. I'm not very happy about that. And look, I could spend the next 10 minutes just griping all about that. However, instead of doing that, I'm just going to take this moment to give a massive shout out to the guys over at Yet Another Squad Builder 2.0. I'll put the link for it down in the description if you guys want a competent, up-to-date squad builder that always puts all the new content in, pilots and upgrades within 24 hours of the information being released. Go to Yet Another Squad Builder 2.0. I strongly recommend it over the official app. This week, we're going to start off with the new factions, talking about the Resistance, talking about the MG100 Star Fortress, more commonly referred to as the Resistance Bomber. And this platform has had a lot of changes going from 1st to 2nd edition. It now costs a bit more, roughly in the ballpark of around 13 points in terms of the relative cost from 1st to 2nd edition. But this makes a lot of sense. It is doing a lot of things that it didn't used to do. Previously in 1st edition, it had a 2-dice turret attack. In 2nd edition, it has a 2-dice turret attack with the dual turret, which in terms of power level is pretty much the same what we expect from 1st to 2nd edition, but it now also has a 3-dice primary attack out the front arc, meaning if you point the dual arc left and right, it has 3 of its quadrants covered at all times, which basically makes it nearly as good as a turret attack from 1st edition. And to boot, it also has the white rotate turret action. So it's very, very difficult to arc dodge. Not so bad if you're an ace and you roll a lot of green dice against those 2 red dice. Not such a big deal. I don't see this as being an ace killer, but getting shots consistently is a very powerful thing. Also, it's the only ship currently in the game that has access to 2 gunner slots, which is very, very interesting. Thankfully, there's nothing too degenerate in the Resistance that can take advantage of this. If this was available to the Rebellion, as it was in 1st edition, we'd have combinations like Luke Skywalker and Bistan happening. There's nothing like that. We do have 1 gunner card that can rotate the turret arc after you attack, and that's Page Tico. So you could combo Page Tico with Veteran Turret Gunner. It is worth pointing out, and thank you to the commenters that actually mentioned this when I asked about this in the last video, if you're going to use this combination, you must rotate your turret arc into different quadrants. So you basically can't double tap out the same arc using Page. It still gives you information, you can still do it out of different arcs, and that still has a certain amount of power level. But because it is situational, the combination might just be a little bit too cute to see meta play. It is worth pointing out that yes, we can do this. Also, I'll just point out one more thing before we dive into these lists, because we had all of these pilots spoiled via a Reddit article. Somebody in Poland, I believe, cracked open one of these kits and revealed everything, and we had English translations. I did mention in that video that there was a slight caveat in if anything was accidentally left out, which would be very easy to do either in the original reveal or the translations, that I would mention it later. And indeed, we had one of these pilots slip through the cracks in that original reveal, and that's Eden Kapal. After you fully execute a blue or white maneuver, if you have not dropped or launched a device this round, you may drop 1 device, which is basically a genius-like ability on a Resistance bomber. Let's move on to these lists. And starting off with a few Patreon lists, we have Fortressing by Belgarath. Oh, also one more thing I'll mention, because we do not have the cards available in the squad builder, we do not have a lot of these things revealed, so I have used the images generated by Yet Another Squad Builder. I do this begrudgingly. I really prefer to use the cards, but look guys, I'm sorry, FFG have dropped the ball on this one. They haven't given us access to the proper high-res images, so hopefully by the time we do our First Order video next week, that'll be fixed, although I'm not holding my breath. We have 2 Star Fortresses, Eden Kapal and Benteen. Eden has Trajectory Simulator, Ferrosphere Paint, Informant, Skill Bombardier, Ray, Seismic Charges and Proton Bombs, and Ben has Trajectory Simulator, Ferrosphere Paint, Skill Bombardier, Page Tico, and the Bomblet Generator. So very much a mirrored build here, not a whole heap of difference going on here. Ferrosphere paint's very, very interesting. We spoke about this when it was revealed. It's 6 points. My biggest criticism of this card is while it does give you a certain degree of control over your opponent's actions, it simply doesn't prevent your opponent from locking your ship. There's going to be a lot of situations where your opponent just isn't going to care about that stress, which does reduce the quality of this card. I don't think it's bad. I think it's very relevant, especially when you only have 2 ships. But I will say there is an include here which I think is probably going to be more consistent, and that's ablative plating. The card costs 2 points less than Ferrosphere paint. Increasing your bid by another 4 points never hurts. I mean, sure, these guys are only initiative 3, but whatever, a bid's still a bid. But in terms of the rest of the list, I'm actually pretty happy with everything going on here. Initiative 3 doesn't really hurt a platform too much when you are able to cover so much of the playing field with your arcs. Just be aware that if you are doing this, 9 times out of 10, you are going to be playing the role of the blocker and the zoner. Which means if you're flying against aces, you just have to make sure that you fly in such a way that you're not overcommitting and allowing those aces to arc dodge you. Even if you're only throwing 2 red dice at them, eventually that is going to wear them down. Sunterfell does not have the amount of ridiculous token stacking he had in first edition, so if you hit him enough times with 2 red dice, you eventually are going to break through that. Plus, the bombs will help you massively with that as well. Having proton bombs and seismic charges on the same platform is always super relevant, and getting more value out of them with the rattle condition card is going to be a lot of fun. Plus, Eden and Page Tico on Ben gives you more flexibility in the way you drop these bombs. I look at this list and I think to myself, there's very few situations where you get poor choices about where you're going to put your bombs. You get as much flexibility as possible. Even if your opponent is flying aces, they're going to have to be super careful in the way they fly them. And if that leads them to fly predictably, well, you can punish them with your attacks, which is really, really cool. And from that point of view, you've given yourself a lot of flexibility. And if you're going to do these sort of brawler bomber builds like fire sprays or star fortresses, I think that's the way to build them out, and I really like the idea of this list. I'm not a huge fan of the bomblet generator. I just don't think it's versatile enough. I think if we change Ferrosphere paint to ablative plating on both platforms and change both bomb loadouts to seismic and protons, apart from anything else, this is going to help give you consistent mirrors across your build. It's going to lead to less confusing situations where you don't have to memorize what different builds you have on either ship. Belgarath, I'm not suggesting that you couldn't keep track of that. I'm suggesting that I'm the kind of person that likes that kind of stuff because I don't like to keep track of asymmetric builds. It tends to confuse me during the games. Also, be aware of the fact that all of your platforms only has 1 green dice. So if you are caught out in a bad situation, these platforms will melt. I predict that this kind of list would lead to very fast games. And that's not a bad thing, but just be careful with the way that flies. Really dig the idea of the list though, really cool. Let's move on to this list by GJH. And this actually uses the same platforms, but we've added in a third one in the Green Squadron Expert on the RZ2 A-Wing. Eden this time has Trajectory Simulator, Skill Bombardier, Proton Bombs, and Ablative Plating. Benteen has the same loadout, and the Green Squadron Expert has Heroic. And I like this. I like having the A-Wing just with Heroic by itself. I think Heroic on a generic platform with not much to do, there's going to be enough upside. That 1 point is just occasionally going to let you reroll all your dice on offense or defense. Yes, you're going to have no control over when that happens, but it's going to have enough value that I think it's worth taking the tournaments. I do wish we could get that second talent on that A-Wing, but I look at the rest of this and I think there's nothing here that I desperately want to cut. Yes, we could talk about adding all that extra stuff onto these bombers. We could think about seismic and all that kind of stuff. But everything here seems powerful and efficient. It would be great if we had gunners on these platforms that weren't skilled bombardiers. It would be great if we had the extra bombing options. But I think what we have here is basically the bare minimum. And as a result, we have builds in the low 80s, which I think are going to be nice and impactful. If the Star Fortress is well costed, this is going to be a nice, efficient way of running them. And do try to remember that in second edition, as opposed to first edition, the meta does seem to be shifting towards relevant pilots and abilities rather than upgrades. So it is worth thinking about this kind of thing as opposed to the really stacked version of the bombers. I'm not saying that's necessarily going to be wrong. I am very excited for stacked versions of like Han on the Falcon and that kind of stuff. These two lists that we just saw do highlight the main differences between those. Let's move on to this list here by Nawada at 194 points. This time we have Benteen alongside two A-Wings. Benteen has Trajectory Simulator, C-3PO, Page Tico, Veteran Turret Gunner, Proton Bombs, Seismic Charges, and we have in the A-Wings Taliesin Lintra with Predator Marksmanship and Prime Thrusters, and Lulo Lampard with Heroic Trick Shot and Prime Thrusters. And just before we go on to the Star Fortress, we're not doing a video here on A-Wings, but I do want to quickly point out that I'm having a lot of interesting conversations with you guys in the comments and over on the Patreon Discord about the different combinations of the double talent on the A-Wing, and I think this is a very interesting conversation. Both of these do interest me greatly because Taliesin is really leaning into that sort of in the bullseye arc, and it's going to suck if that synergy breaks and you get no value out of the pilot skill and both of those talents. But look, it's an A-Wing, it has a fantastic dial, we're at Initiative 5, so I don't think there's going to be too many matchups where that is not relevant. Just be aware that there might be some where it's not, and that is going to hurt. Lulo Lampard with Heroic and Trick Shot, these are just two great value cards. 1 point each, they're going to be relevant enough of the time that you're going to increase the amount of dice or get all those rerolls. It is a tad awkward when you do have a shot through a rock or you're defending through a rock, because that increases the amount of dice you roll, which lowers the likelihood of getting all blanks on your dice. But then again, I guess that also means that you're rerolling more dice when they do blank out, so a little bit synergistic, but mainly these are two high value cards. Plus, Lulo Lampard is really looking at ace type builds. So these value cards that are going to help you eke out a bit more value in certain situations is really what this pilot wants to be doing. Plus, having prime thrusters on both, being initiative matched, seems pretty relevant. Okay, over to Ben's build. Trajectory Simulator, C-3PO, Page Tico, Veteran Turret Gunner. We have the Page Veteran Turret Gunner combination here, which is really, really cool. I like that that's gone alongside Taliesin Lintra, because Taliesin also has this very aggressive. Having those two together means we can get a lot of shots on the table. When the Page Veteran Turret Gunner combo does pull off, it means you can double tap with 2 red dice, so enough red dice on the table is going to lead to you winning games. Just be aware that yes, you do have to move the arc to a different quadrant to make this work, but at the very least, I'm not too concerned about that, because Veteran Turret Gunner is really the only thing you're losing value on in that scenario, because Page still allows you to drop a bomb, and that gives you a little bit more flexibility and options, so it's not like you have this massive synergy that's broken and you get no value out of it in the end of the day. That's interesting. C-3PO, I do like a lot. It's interesting that he's only 6 points, and we get no value out of that first sentence on his card, but I still think for 6 points he's fantastic. Getting extra calculate tokens, being able to coordinate those A-Wings, yeah, they can't be beyond range 2, but who cares? That's still a lot of value. And in the situations where you're just going to calculate, that's not bad either. You still get 2 calculate tokens, and that, mathematically speaking, is just a little bit better than 1 focus token, most of the time anyway. You've got the combination of protons, seismics, and trajectory simulator, so you have all the options available to you in terms of bombing. I've spoken about this before. Proton bombs and seismic charges basically allows you to drop a bomb, and if you keep an eye on where that's going to land, you can either choose to detonate in situation or destroy a rock just near that, and it gives you a little bit more reach. It's very, very relevant when you're fighting against aces. Plus, with Trajectory Simulator, you can do that out the front or out the back. So you have essentially 4 options as long as there's rocks near those dropping points. Just be aware you've opted not to use ablative plating, and I can understand that. You've got a 6-point bid. I really wouldn't want to eat into that too much if you could avoid it. You could turn that Veteran Turret Gunner into a Skill Bombardier and put all the points saved into ablative plating. Now that's really not playing into the strategy that you've put on the table here. It's less aggressive, it's more versatile in the way you bomb, but I think both of those builds are definitely worth talking about. Bear in mind that more consistency is a good thing for meta play, and that's why I think Skill Bombardier and ablative plating might just be more relevant here. But that really does come down to the way you fly. If the Page Veteran Turret Gunner combo does come off and does work consistently, that's a lot of potential upside. We have one last list here, again alongside 2 A-Wings, we have Veni this time. Also worth pointing out, I didn't actually have any submissions for any list that used anything apart from Star Fortress and A-Wings. And we had a lot of conversation with all the points were revealed, a lot of people saying things are undercosted. I do want to point out, this kind of list building does highlight potentially some of the reasons why some of these ships do cost a bit less than they would otherwise if they were on, say, the Rebellion. We do not have a lot of squad building options yet in the Resistance, so keeping things at a certain cost means we can field them in certain combinations. And if things were just a little bit more expensive in a few key areas, it means that the Resistance just might not have any competitive options. Same with the First Order. Just bear that in mind, guys. When we're talking about costing, the faction that they're fielded in is also relevant in that conversation. It's not just about the power level of a ship in a vacuum. Veni has Trajectory Simulator, Pattern Analyzer, Perceptive Co-Pilot, Skill Bombardier, Ray, Seismic Charges, and Proton Bombs. Lulo Lampor and Taliesin Lintra once again. Lulo Lampor has Heroic and Prime Thrusters, as does Taliesin Lintra. So a bit more of a lighter build on those guys. Plus, we've jacked this all the way up to 200 points. What are we looking at that's done that? It's Ray. Basically, Ray on Veni is the main culprit for that. While your defend is in a friendly ship's turret, you may add one eyeball result to your roll. And that does make a lot of sense with Ray. Essentially, you always have the ability to spend that force token. Perceptive Co-Pilot also gives you more focus results, so it's a bit more of a turtley build. That's cool. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But do bear in mind that you've had to strip back the builds on those A-Wings. I do like the idea of having 2 talents on them. And look, maybe being more turtley is just a better option. Maybe the 2 talents is just not going to prove to be that effectual. But it does make me sad that we can't at least get Trickshot on those platforms. I think that has enough value to justify that 1 point. If I was looking at this build and thinking where we could change a few things, I mean, Perceptive Co-Pilot is the main thing I'm looking at and thinking that's very expensive for the effect you're getting. I would strongly recommend looking at C-3PO over Perceptive Co-Pilot. It means you're saving 4 points. It means you also get access to the coordinate. Now, I know that 2 calculate tokens aren't quite as good as 2 focus tokens. In fact, it's nowhere near as good. But it still gives you the option to use it on offense and defense. It still synergizes with Veni's ability, and you still have multiple tokens, so alongside Ray, you're pretty much guaranteed to convert most of your dice on every single roll. And that's still good. I think just upping the amount of support you can give to those A-Wings is enough upside to take C-3PO over Perceptive Co-Pilot, even if they were the same cost. And with those points saved, you have a 4-point bid, or you could put Trickshot on those A-Wings. I just think there's enough upside there. Perceptive Co-Pilot's a very, very interesting card because FFG have heavily costed that effect. Which is fair enough. We don't have access to the amount of consistent dice modification that we did in first edition. It combos with things like Hangar on the Scum faction. It combos with anything that allows you to take a focus action. So it does have a lot of potential upside. But if you're not exploiting that potential upside, it might not be worth putting in your list. It's a very interesting card in terms of power level. It's always worth being aware of that when you build with this card. And thank you for submitting that list, Jack. Once again, it's good to see sort of 2 versions of the same lists. And thanks to all my patrons for voting on which of these we should do. It was quite an interesting one, actually, because we didn't have a whole heap of submission for the Star Fortress. But I get the impression that some of the patrons like to vote for things that they're not sure how to build with. So there's not as much hype around this as, say, your Poe Dameron or your Resistance Falcon. Do not worry, guys. We will get onto those soon enough. Next week, we are going to cover one of the archetypes from the First Order, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, don't forget to like and subscribe. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and Reddit. Please consider supporting my Patreon. Thank you so much to all of my existing patrons. I'll catch you guys in the next video.